Hey gang, Jim Farmer here. It's Friday. It's Friday afternoon, and it's the day after Thanksgiving. And I thought maybe today, instead of releasing a podcast and doing a podcast this week, what I do is just give you guys a quick kind of a fishing report, and then maybe talk about the spoon bite a little bit, the winter spoon bite. So I thought. Right now we're kind of getting into the ditch season where we have, a pretty good amount of success with spoons, and there's all kinds of different spoons out there. But I'm going to just spend a few minutes and give you guys kind of some examples of the winter ditch bite and the spoon bite as far as I'm concerned, and what I've used over the years here on Lanier. Just a couple of brief descriptions of a few of the spoons and the spoon patterns that I use and why I use them. I will tell you this, that when I was in the Navy, I was an instructor for a brief period of time, and when we had a lesson guide, when I'd give a lesson out, at the first of the lesson there was usually some kind of paragraph where you'd give your students kind of a motivating speech or a motivating statement or a motivating story before you went into the actual lesson and the instruction. So I'm going to talk about the spoon a little bit today, but I wanted to give you guys kind of a motivating story before we get started on the spoon on Lanier and how I use the spoon on Lanier. But I've been using spoons for a long time. I can go back as far as the 80s and throwing Castmaster spoons out in California for trout, as well as stripers at Lake Mead. Sometimes we use spoons there too, casting spoons. So it really wasn't a something new to me when I came here and started fishing for stripers and even bass. There was always spoons in the back of my mind, and spoons have their place whether it's the middle of summer or the middle of winter. But I can tell you this, one time, it's been about maybe 12, 13, 14 years ago, I was fishing a striper tournament up in Cherokee, Tennessee, at Lake Cherokee, Tennessee. That's in northern Tennessee. And our striper tournament was kind of late fall, mid to late fall. And up at Lake Cherokee, they had an oxygen system down by the dam. And right before we had our tournament weekend there, the oxygen system failed. And what happened was there was a big striper kill on the lake. This was Lake Cherokee. It was well documented way back when. So we were going to fish the striper tournament. Problem was, by the time we got there for the tournament, most of the stripers that were over 5 pounds had been killed due to the die-off and not having an oxygen system down by the dam where they could successfully survive during kind of late summer into early fall when they needed that extra oxygen in the water. Basically, we still had the tournament, and there was probably 150 striper teams in the tournament, and most of the stripers that we were catching were less than 2-3 pounds. When you have a striper kill, a lot of times the only stripers that will survive something like that are the smaller ones, the ones that are just a few pounds and less. They seem to be a little more durable to things that kill stripers. In this case, it was a lack of oxygen, but the smaller stripers were able to survive the lack of oxygen. So we've got our tournament down there, big striper kill. Nobody can find stripers that were over, say, a couple pounds. So there were some guys that had jet boats that ran up the river there at Cherokee, and they got some bigger stripers. But most of the guys that fished down on the main lake, they were only able to catch stripers that were 2 or 3 pounds. So it looked like it was going to be a bad tournament. We were kind of mid-pack after the first day. Nothing special for us. We had a couple of stripers like everybody else had that were anywhere from 3-4 pounds, something like that. We were allowed 2 to weigh in. And so the second day, at the end of the day, we just had a couple minutes left, and we were still going to be mid-pack. We had 2 small stripers that were about 3 pounds apiece. And so it was looking pretty grim for us. But right before we were actually packing up to leave and go to the weigh-in with our two little stripers, and we wasn't going to finish in the money. But right before we got ready to leave to go to weigh-in, we were putting away the gear, and all of a sudden a big school of hybrids started popping all close to the boat, and within casting range. And we both had on a spoon, my partner and I, and we both had spoons for casting because sometimes you can cast and catch hybrids out there. And this school of hybrids came up, and we contemplating whether to mess with them or not mess with them, but we said, okay, we're going to make one cast apiece into the school, see if we can get something bigger than the 2 3-pounders that we had. And we both made a cast into the school of hybrids, and we both caught hybrids that were over 6 pounds. We were able to cull both of our 3-pound stripers out and bring hybrids that one was 7 pounds and one was pretty close to 7 pounds. And so we were able to weigh the hybrids in the tournament, and that launched us right into the top 10. And so we had a top 10 finish. And the way we caught those hybrids was casting a couple of little spoons. And so, you know, that kind of made the difference between a good tournament and a bad tournament for us, was being able to cast those spoons and catch those hybrids. Those hybrids weren't affected by the striper kill. Hybrids are a lot more durable than regular stripers when it comes to oxygen and things like that. So the lack of oxygen in Lake Cherokee didn't affect the hybrids as much as it affected the striper population. But we caught the hybrids on a spoon. Had we not thrown those spoons and caught those hybrids, we wouldn't have done as well as we did, and we finished in the money and got a check and got out of there. But that was one instance where a spoon had helped us. Another instance was more recently, I'd say about 6 or 7 years ago. It was early winter. It was actually about the time it is now. It was November. And I was coming down lake. It was in the evening time. I was coming down lake after fishing, kind of up lake during the day. And I'm headed back to the ramp coming down lake. And so I happened to be looking around. It was kind of in the 6 Mile area, Shady Grove area. And I just looked into a cove right there off the main lake that I was running down. And I saw a big school of fish that were surfacing, stripers. They were surfacing in this cove. There's a lot of them. It's a pretty big cove. So I pointed the boat towards that cove. Now, there was a striper boat that was in the same area that I was, and they saw the same school. There was one guy in a T-top striper boat, and we both were about the same distance from the school of stripers that was busting. So we both hauled butt over there, and we both got there at the same time. So I've got a Seabull tied on, a white Seabull tied on, and it's November when this is happening. And so I throw my white Seabull right into the mix of stripers that were coming up and surfacing. It didn't take but maybe 3 or 4 seconds to striper hit the Seabull, and I was hooked up with a striper. So I'm fighting a striper. I looked over there at the guy in the T-top, and he's hooked up too, and he's fighting a fish too. So we're like, great, you know, we're both hooked up. We got a double. And so we're kind of side by side, but we're a little ways from each other. So I bring mine in, and mine's, 5, 6, 7 pound striper, something like that, out of the school. He brings in a big bass, and so I unhook my striper and release him and turn around. The fish are still blowing up in the cove here and there, and he releases his bass, and we throw back in there. I couldn't tell what he was throwing, but I was throwing a white Seabull. Throw back in there. Just as soon as my white Seabull hits the water again, catch a striper. He's hooked up too. I see he's hooked over there. We both get our fish in, and his is another big bass, and mine's a striper. So after he caught that second big bass, I asked him, I wondered what the difference was between what he was doing and what I was doing, because I was catching stripers with my Seabull, and he was catching big bass with something in a school of stripers that were busting. So I asked him, if you don't mind me asking, what are you using over there? And he was pretty close to me, within talking distance, and he showed me a white spoon, a little white spoon. And I'm like, why is it that you're not catching stripers on that? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, the stripers just ain't hitting it, but the bass are hitting it. So I'm like, oh, there's bass in with these stripers. And he goes, yeah. So he said, I'm just casting the white spoon in there and letting it get down through the stripers, and then a bass will hit it almost every time. So I realized that the bass were underneath the school of stripers, and they were kind of feeding with the stripers. But the thing of it was, the bass were underneath the stripers. So about 2 weeks after that, Matt O'Connell and I got in a UGA Open tournament that they had. And we wound up winning the tournament. And we won the tournament, and the way we won the tournament was casting white spoons in ditches and catching big fish just right in the center of the ditch with these white spoons. And we caught one that was over 5. I think it was 5.12, something like that. And then we caught another one that was right at 5. And then we had, some that were your 3 to 4 pounders. But we had like 19, almost 20 pounds, 19.6 something, I think, was the total that we had. But we had caught them on casting the white spoon. So that was a few years back, and that gave us the win in the UGA Open tournament. So I never forgot that white spoon and catching those big 5-pounders on casting that white spoon that day. It's always kind of been in the back of my mind. So we fast forward till this Monday. And so this Monday morning I go out, and I had been messing with this school of stripers that's been cruising the creek. And there's been a few striper fishermen out there that's been chasing them around. There was one guy out there that was chasing them with a fly rod one day and caught one of them out of the group of stripers that were kind of cruising around, surfacing every once in a while. So I had tried to catch him. I tried several different things. I threw a fluke at him and a few other baits. I didn't have a white Seabowl. I was out. I got some now, but I was out at the time. So I couldn't throw one of them at him. So I tried some different stuff, some swim baits, and they just wouldn't bite anything. And so last weekend, I thought, what I didn't throw at him was a white spoon. So I tied a white spoon on, and when I went out there Monday morning, I don't have a sonar, so I'm just going by mapping. So what I wanted to do was just go run some ditches and throw that white spoon around, and if the stripers showed up, I was going to throw the spoon at the stripers. I really wanted to catch one of the stripers on a white spoon. So the white spoon, I had the white spoon tied on Monday, and so first ditch I go to, get right in the center of the ditch, and I'm sitting in about 40 feet of water. I don't quite know it's 40 feet, because all I got's mapping, so I'm going by the contour on my mapping, and since the lake's probably 9 feet, over 9 feet low right now, it kind of messes up the mapping unless you put an offset on the mapping for about a 9-foot change in depth in the lake. But I don't have that, so I don't know exactly where I'm at. I don't have sonar, so I can't tell where the bottom is. So I just went right to the center of a ditch. I put it in what I thought was 30, 40 feet of water and just started casting the white spoon around, kind of in all directions, basically fan casting it. So I'm casting it towards the middle of the ditch, just got there, and I don't know, it was probably the first or second cast. It didn't even hit the bottom. But I was kind of pumping it back to the boat, letting it rise and fall back to the boat. And when it got close to the boat, well, I felt a fish kind of ticket, And so that told me that, okay, there's at least one fish there. So right when the spoon gets to where I can see it at the boat, I see this fish that's chasing, and he comes up and just whacks it right by the boat and takes off with it. So I fight him, first fish on the white spoon. So I go, good, that's a good sign. You release him, threw it back in there, bam, catch another one on the next cast, in the middle of the ditch, kind of in the middle of the ditch. And so when I caught the second one, he was a little bigger than the first one. And then I caught a third one that was bigger than the first two, and it was probably close to 4 pounds. So I had 3 fish out of that ditch within a matter of probably 5 to 10 minutes. So I thought, okay, we got fish in the ditches now, so I can start shopping the ditches. And so after I left out of that ditch, I went to another ditch, and I was kind of looking in this ditch, but I was looking at another ditch that was across the little bay that I was in, and I saw some fish come up in the center of the ditch. And I said, okay, there's fish over there. They came up to the surface, and they were right in the center of the ditch when they came up to the surface. So I kind of knew that ditch had fish in it, so I kind of eased my way over there started making casts with the spoon and immediately started hooking up. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to turn on the video camera and I'm going to get some video of some of these catches with the white spoon. So what I did was I just turned on the video camera, I rolled into the center of the ditch, I started making casts and just kind of started catching fish right away. I mean, they were in the center of the ditch, but they were also in the side of the ditch. And I realized real quick that these fish just about every one I caught was spitting up threadfin that were probably about an inch long, something like that. But they really matched that spoon. And the spoon that I was using with this one right here, you can see it, it's a War Eagle spoon. It's a 1/2 ounce spoon, it's white. And I've been using War Eagle spoons for quite a few years now, and they're really durable, they hold together good. Haven't had one fail yet in any way, shape, or form. So that's what I use basically year after year. When they're eating the small threadfin, the white War Eagle's good, and they also make one that's chrome or silver, and it's pretty shiny, and it's good too. My rule of thumb is if it's sunny out, I'm probably going to be using the chrome or the shiny silver 1/2 ounce War Eagle spoon. But when it's cloudy out, overcast, like really, the white one is the better one to use in overcast skies, in my opinion. And so you'll see in the video that I'm going to show you guys in just a little bit, you'll see how successful this thing is in the ditches casting from time to time. And you know, it's not like every year it's gonna be just this crazy bite on the 1/2 ounce white War Eagle spoon. Like last year and the year before, it wasn't as good as it was, say, Monday when I was out there. But usually when you start your winter, like mid to late November going into early December, you're going to have a lot of fish that pile up in the ditches. Once it gets to be about January and February, they're going to start wanting to stage a little bit, so a lot of them will start coming out of the ditches and kind of looking at ledges and shallower places a lot, especially in the summer days. But when you've got these cloudy days in November, December, shorter days, cooler days, they're going to the ditch. They're not going to be up there in the shallows if it's not sunny and warm. So they're going to kind of stay in the ditch. And so that's the way I caught them all on Monday. But as you'll see in the video, I was casting this spoon. And I hit 3 different ditches, and I kind of rotated through the ditches. You'll see all that in the video. But you'll kind of see the way that I used the spoon whenever I was casting it. Basically, Monday when I was using it, I just kind of cast it out there, let it kind of flutter drop to the bottom. For me, it was mainly the bottom is what I was focusing on Monday, and so I'd let it just kind of drop down to the bottom. And that's another thing, was I was using high vis braid, and when I use high vis braid for this application, I can kind of watch the braid and I can kind of tell when it hits the bottom. But I'm keeping most of my slack out of the line when it's dropping down towards the bottom too. But I've got a high vis braid on here. I've also got about an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader that's 4 or 5 feet long. The rod that I'm using is a St. Croix rod, and you guys will see this in the video too. But it was one that was kind of special made, kind of a custom made rod for veterans, take a veteran fishing, and that's by St. Croix, and it's 7-foot medium. And I just happen to have this reel. It's a Penn Battle 3 2500. I just happen to have that laying around the shop here. I had it on another rod, and the rod had broke, and so I needed another rod to put it on. So I just coupled it with the St. Croix 7-footer here, and it worked great for throwing the spoon. So that's the way I caught them on Monday, and you'll see in the video here in just a little bit that the spoon was really effective. And to be honest with you, there's been past years where I've done really well casting the white spoon. Even won a tournament here on Lanier, an UGA Open tournament on it a few years back with Matt O'Connell. But it's a great pattern this time of year for the ditches. I mean, it doesn't always work, but it's always an option for you. It doesn't really have to be a ditch either. I'll tell you what I did last week with this spoon. I was throwing it out on the ends of points and catching fish with it too. Now, sometimes if I was throwing it in areas where I didn't know the bottom, because once again, I don't have sonar, I don't know if there's brush down there or something like that, I wouldn't let it sink all the way to the bottom in these unknown areas. And, you know, if you can't see the bottom, I wouldn't recommend letting it sink all the way to the bottom, because you're probably going to get it hung up and lose it, especially if you're in 40 feet plus deep water. But in that case, and in the case that we won the tournament, the UGA tournament, I wasn't focusing on the bottom. I was casting it out. I was kind of letting it sink for about 3-4 seconds and then just starting to pump it back to the boat. Big pulls, and then as it's dropping, reeling down on the rod, and then another big pull, and you know, and it's just kind of dropping and then coming back up when you make the pull and kind of flutter dropping, and they'd hit it that way. Now that was not letting it hit the bottom. Now where I was at on Monday, all the bottom was clean, every bit of bottom. It was like these flats that had ditches in them, but it was just pretty much clean of any kind of brush or structure where I was catching these fish, and it was pretty comforting to know that, you know, you're probably not going to get this hung up on anything like an old tree or something like that out there. So that was another reason I had success with the white spoon on Monday. Jimmy Sanders, I had called Jimmy and told him to come over at one point, so he pulled up kind of next to me, and we were kind of making the same cast in the same little area, and I was catching them on just about every cast, and Jimmy was struggling. And another thing that was kind of interesting too was Jimmy's got live scope, he's got all the electronics. I don't have any sonar, so I don't know what's underneath me. I can't see. But Jimmy said he scanned the area, and he said he saw very few fish, if any fish, just a few here and there. But I was catching them on every cast, and Jimmy would catch one every once in a while. Not like I was catching them. What the difference was between what's Jimmy doing and what I'm doing, couldn't really tell you. I know that Jimmy, he had his electronics on, so he was probably pinging a little bit, you know, and that could add to it. I don't know how much pinging would add to it, but we were basically using the same white spoon, making the same cast, and I mean, you could say, well, maybe it's the leader or something like that, or maybe it's just something different I was doing. I was using long pulls. Jimmy, I noticed his pulls were a little shorter than mine. Maybe that had something to do with it. But at any rate, we were just spot locked up and making casts in the ditch and catching some fish out of that. And you'll see that in the video, and you'll probably see me talking to Jimmy a little bit. You can't really see him, but he's there. But that was Monday. I want to tell you guys another spoon that I like to use in another video that I made about 4 years ago, almost to the day. But if you go back to, I believe it was 2019 November, I think it was November the 19th in 2019, somewhere right around that date, you're going to see a video that I made of another spoon that I like to use, and another way I like to use the spoon. Now this one I was casting, but back then what I was doing was I was using the bigger War Eagle spoon. This is like 7/8 ounce or something like that. It's the larger War Eagle spoon. And the day that I made the video 4 years ago, I was using this spoon and having a lot of success. And you can see, if you go to that video 4 years ago, November, well, you're going to see I had a lot of success with what I was doing with this spoon. Now, I'll tell you a little story about this spoon. Back 4 years ago, when I was using this spoon and catching the fish on it, a guy pulled up to me, and he was asking me what I was using, and I told him that I was using this big spoon. If he had any, it was chrome War Eagle spoon, silver War Eagle spoon. He didn't have any, and he told me, he said, "Are you marking fish?" Because I'm not marking any fish. He said, "I don't see any fish here." And I said, "I don't either." And he goes, "But you're catching them. I mean," he goes, "there's got to be fish here." And I said, "Yeah, all I'm doing is dropping this down on a clean bottom and the fish kind of show up." And he's like, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, every time I drop it down, there's no fish there. You just have to fish on faith. You know, you just have to trust that the fish are going to be there." But I said, "I'm not really marking any fish. I'm just dropping the spoon down and fishing on faith." And he's like, "Oh, wow." He was like really shocked about that, to the point I think he thought it was some kind of I don't know, divine intervention or something, you know, but it really wasn't. I didn't tell him this, but it was kind of funny. I kind of chuckled afterwards. But with the big spoon here, I'll tell you something that's kind of unique about War Eagle spoons is there's that barrel swivel on the top. And that barrel swivel lets the spoon just turn all the way around. I mean, it's doing 360s. And this big spoon, this big War Eagle spoon, the silver one, when you drop it straight down and let it go all the way down to the bottom and you lift it, when you lift it, it's going to spin, it's going to rotate. And when it rotates, it flashes. And when it flashes, it attracts the bass. And so a lot of times with the bigger spoon, this one right here, and you'll see it if you go to the video in 2019, you'll see I've got screenshots, graph shots of fish that are around this spoon, and they just show up out of nowhere. But it's because of the flash. I like to tell people about this because some people just don't know enough about spoons. But when you raise this spoon and it's coming up, it's rotating around like this. And when the sun's out, and we like to use our chrome and silver spoons when the sun's out, it flashes, and when it flashes, here comes the fish, and they just show up. When you flutter, let this thing drop, and it kind of flutters on the drop, it's also spinning around, and it's also flashing. So it's kind of like a fish attractant. You know, you've seen like salmon, they use big flashers for salmon, and it attracts the fish because they see that flash. Well, it's the same thing with bass and stripers. They see the flash from this big spoon, and they just come. They want to know what where the flash is emanating from, coming from, and so they usually track this spoon down. And you can see it in the video. You'll see me drop this spoon down, and then you'll just see 5, 6, 7 fish just show up out of nowhere on the graph. And I got some good video of the screenshots of the graph too, when the fish are down there and how I'm catching them, and you can see the spoon in the video. So I highly recommend that you check out that video from November of 2019, and you're going to learn all about using a big spoon, a heavier spoon, in a different application, a vertical application, vice the smaller spoon like this white spoon, casting it. But it's a great video to watch, and you probably, if you're going to spoon fish in the ditches, you need to watch that video. It's really going to help you out because, like I say, I've got plenty of screenshots of what a ditch looks like as far as contour goes and mapping. I've got some video of mapping and then screenshots of what a ditch actually looks like, and I've got plenty of video that shows how I'm using this thing and catching fish with that. So that's a video that you need to check out from 2019. It's called Lanier Ditch Fishing 101 Vertical. And it tells you a lot about vertical fishing, these spoons. There's a lot of different spoons out there, and don't get me wrong, it's not like War Eagle is the one that does the best or is the only one that works on Lanier. There's a lot of them out there. I'm talking a lot, you know, and they all work to some degree. Some work better than others. There's colors. I used to use all kinds of colors. But for a practical application and to learn on, I would use the bigger spoon. You got to be careful with these heavier spoons because they like to get hung up. But when they get hung up, just a quick piece of advice, use the spoon's weight itself to get this thing unlodged from what it's lodged into. A lot of times these little hooks get stuck in a little bit of timber or something like that. So you don't want to keep pulling as hard as you can to keep burying that barb in the timber. What you want to do is just get straight over the top of it and just use some quick little jerks to try and get the weight of the spoon to kind of go up and down and kind of pull that hook out of the structure that it's stuck in. So it's kind of finessey, But you know, you can't keep losing these things. If you're like me, I've got limited packs of these things, and if I go through 3 or 4, I'm going to be out. So I like to spend a little time to try and get them dislodged myself to save me a little money, and it may save my last spoon someday. So that's the big spoon. Check out that video from 2019. And the video that I made on Monday, I've probably got about a dozen bass in there, and so I got those on video, and you can kind of see how I'm casting and working that spoon and catching the fish on the spoon. It's a really a great day for me. I really enjoyed it. Probably caught over 40 fish during the day. So we'll go ahead and that's about the only fishing report I've got for this week. Didn't do a podcast this week. We'll probably be back in another week or two. I want Jeff to get back, and he's got some deer hunting, some deer footage, and we're going to get a couple other things lined up before we do our next podcast. But that should be coming up real quick. Until then, I'm going to kind of give you guys some fishing reports and let you know what's going on the lake with me. So we got the video here, and so we're going to go ahead and check out the video, and I'll see you guys next Friday. Good luck out there fishing. So here's the video right here. Find the right ditch, you can do this all day. Show you guys something. That's the size of the bait this guy's eating. I just pulled that out of his mouth. He's got several down in there. He's got 6 or 7 or 8 more of these little suckers. There's another good one. You're on a roll.
I'm on the street.
Yeah. They're blowing up in the back there.
Yeah, I see it. Big.
Oh, there's one. Now this one's pretty good size here.
I don't think I'm gonna put him in the round there. got another?
Yeah.
It ain't bad being able to keep getting good fish.
This guy's just fully loaded with shad. Got a little backbone. This one's got a little backbone here. Oh man, you gotta come over here, Jimmy. This is where the good stuff is, over here. Yeah. Yeah, they're all good. Come on, man. Give up. I love this stuff. Rod's getting the workout. Oh, boy. I gotta get the net for this one.